Now I just feel a crushing weight of expectation, so thanks, I guess. Before I get into what I've prepared this evening, I wanted to say first and foremost that if I say anything that bothers you or maybe even offends you, I would really appreciate it if you took that to Daryl because he put me up to this. On a very serious note, a lot of you have encouraged me to do this for a while. I thank you for it. And if I'm honest, I've known what I've wanted to say for a really long time. I just didn't really know how to say it or approach it. So with that in mind, what I'm going to say may sound similar to my Wednesday night invitation on spiritual burnout, if you recall that. Some of you who are in class with me or had certain conversations with me, this may sound a little tangential there as well. Because I thought at the time I was describing a cause, but as I get more retrospective with it and continue to think about it, I think I was describing symptoms of something else. And so that's what I want to present to you this evening, is that cause. But I can't discuss that cause. I can't discuss this cause without first talking about this man. So this is Dr. Robin Dunbar. He is an anthropologist and a psychologist. He specializes in primate behavior. He is currently the head of the Social and Evolutionary Neuroscience Research Group in the Department of Experimental Psychology at the University of Oxford. And if you're like me and thought, wow, that's a mouthful, rest assured, he's about monkey business. You see, we've known for a really long time that animals have social circles, families, packs, herds, those sorts of things. What Dr. Dunbar noticed in monkeys specifically, that when a monkey is injured, say he falls from a tree, all of the monkeys in the vicinity will show concern for that monkey, but only a very few of them actually do anything to help. Get the monkey to safety, bring it food, bring it water, take care of its wounds. And he thought that was very interesting. And so he looked into it, he analyzed behavior, did some science, did some math, and he determined that the monkeys that act to assist the injured monkey are actually friends with that monkey. They spent the most time together in social activities like grooming, eating, playing, monkey business. And then he asked a very provocative question. He said, does the same thing apply to humans? Is there a correlation? Not only did he answer that question in the affirmative that yes, there is a similar relationship to people, he arrived at an oddly specific number. And being the humble guy he is, he named it Dunbar's number. This is Dunbar's number, 150. This is the cognitive limit to the number of individuals with whom any one person can maintain a stable relationship. Now, what this doesn't mean is that we should cap our friends lists at 150. What this means is that when something happens to someone, we're not really capable of understanding it or processing it if it's outside of our 150 connections that we've made. And you may disagree with that and say, I'm a people person, I empathize with everybody, I love people. Let's consider for a moment that we do this every day and we don't even think about it. We don't even process it. So let's consider the number of natural disasters that occur every year, hurricanes, mudslides, tornadoes. Let's consider geopolitical stuff, shootings, war in Ukraine. What's the magnitude of victims year over year? Is it in the hundreds? Is it in the thousands? We're unconcerned because it's not here, it's not happening to us. And I'm not saying that from a standpoint that we're this callous and heartless people. It's kind of built into us. So I say all of this to kind of build up to my cause. This evening I want to discuss our proximity shaping our responsibility. I think this is a very simple principle that we're getting very, very far away from. And I intend to use scripture this evening to defend this. So why even bother talking about this? Well, we are in an environment where we are oversaturated with opportunities to do good to others. And we have this built-in limitation that we have to overcome to do it. We are now more connected than ever through our technology, and because of that, news travels fast, both good and bad. We have become more aware of prolific tragedy everywhere. Simply look at the number of GoFundMes that are out there for something that's happened to someone that is tragic. And I don't know what your personal decision-making skills are When I get oversaturated, I just say, this is all noise, and I shut it off. So as a person who's called to do good works, we have to find some balance. On one end, we can stretch ourselves thin, trying to do as much as we can for as many people, possibly even to our own personal detriment. And on the other end, we can't be like the Jews that Jesus described in Mark 7, where he says they were unwilling to even really help their parents. So the first natural question we would ask is, what are my responsibilities, or who am I responsible for? And we're going to turn and read some of these. But first and foremost, we have a responsibility to our natural household in 1 Timothy 5 and 8. 1 Timothy 5 and 8. But if anyone doesn't provide for his own, and especially for those of the household, for his household, he has denied the faith, and he is worse than an unbeliever. My second responsibility is my spiritual household. That would be you guys, and you're responsible to me. And what I have referenced there is Acts 2 and 45. This is shortly after the day of Pentecost. In the verses that follow, we see disciples selling their goods to help other disciples stay in Jerusalem longer so they can really learn more about their new religion. Thirdly, we have a responsibility to our remote Christian family. These would be other congregations in other areas. What I have listed there is 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, and in that we see donations being collected and made to other groups to address certain problems. And some of you may actually recall we did this here several years ago in Houston to help out brethren there who had suffered from the flooding. And last but not least, we have a responsibility to our non-Christian neighbors. We're going to flip to this one and read it as well. This is Galatians 6 and 10. Galatians 6 and 10. So then, while we have opportunity, let us do good to all, but especially to those who are of the household of faith. Only really, to me, concreting the parable of the Good Samaritan, who is my neighbor. And when considering all of these options that we're oversaturated in, how do we easily remove a few? These responsibilities can help us, and I can think of no better way of saying it or summing it up than the way St. Augustine said years ago. All people should be loved equally, but you cannot do good to all people equally. So you should take particular thought for those who, as if by lot, happen to be particularly close to you in terms of time, place, or any other circumstances. But what about our attention? That's a little different, isn't it? So, who needs our attention, or what gets our attention? If we have a responsibility to someone, then therefore shouldn't they receive my attention? I think we could ask ourselves who is genuinely going to be worse off without it. Meaning, not paying attention to Twitter is going to go unnoticed. But try neglecting your parents, your spouse, your children, your siblings, or your church family. That's going to get some attention in the wrong way. I think we would all agree that we here at Jones Road have something very special, that we are responsible to each other and that we are attentive to each other. But let's for a moment imagine what would it be like if we were only composed of kind of committed members? Would that not look like the church of Laodicea in Revelation chapter 3? You're not really hot, you're not really cold. Maybe we respectively have some history with groups like that. And when I say attention, I don't mean the leftover stuff at the end of the day. I mean our genuine, authentic, all I can reasonably give you attention. But having said that, it's not very easy. In a way, it's not as cut and dry, and I'll word it that way. So Acts chapter 6 is the problem of the Hellenistic Jews. We're going to read some of those verses here in just a second, but I want us to see how the apostles handled this. Verse 1, now at this time, while the disciples were increasing in number, a complaint arose on the part of the Hellenistic Jews against the native Hebrews because their widows were being overlooked in the daily serving of food. So the 12 summoned the congregation of the disciples and said, it is not desirable for us to neglect the word of God in order to serve tables. Therefore, brethren, select from among you 7 men of good report, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, whom we may put in charge of this task. But we will devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word. So the apostles recognized this problem, that it was a legitimate problem and a growing concern, and it was their responsibility to fix. But they were also wise enough to realize that if they kept their attention on this problem, it would have taken them away from a higher priority responsibility. So what pulls these things away from us or tries to steal it from us? I'm intentionally about to wade into some waters here that are going to ultimately end up in Daryl's inbox being blown up later. But a lot of the things that we give our concern to, people and things, they don't need it. Because we've already established our responsibility groups or orders and who deserves it. And if I'm giving my attention to something that matters, I have to actively deny giving it to something that doesn't matter. Because I don't believe our attention is, I think we overestimate our attention and its ability to renew itself. And before I go further, I just want to say, I don't think these things are bad or evil, but that we need to ensure that we keep them in check versus these other responsibilities that we've already talked about. So what's distraction number one? It's our jobs, isn't it? Now there's several verses, these are two, that talk about our work ethic. And I'm not challenging those verses this evening. But what I am challenging is the notion that the Christian has to be the best worker on the job. Because we have to ask ourselves, what has more meaning? Me being the best brother and the best disciple, or the best employee? Because we don't delineate enough between doing a good job and giving our job absolutely everything we can. It's very easy to take these verses and others and use them to justify an overcommitment to our job, being a slave to our job, or being a workaholic. When we need to keep in mind, what is the overall point of the gospel that we're striving for? Is it for maintaining and establishing relationships with people, or is it about making money? And when we think about it in such simple terms, I think the answer is very obvious to us. Because what is our attitude on work, or what should our attitude be? Are we like the farmer of Luke 12, always trying to build a bigger barn, or are we just trying to take care of ourselves and others? No more, no less. It probably doesn't take you very long at this point to realize that I value honesty. I thrive on brutal, hurt my feelings honesty. So allow me to be brutally honest with you. If I drop dead right now, I am replaced in 3 weeks. In 6 months, I am a distant, if not totally forgotten memory. And at absolutely no point between those two things are they going to miss me. Let me contrast that to my relationship with Rachel. If I drop dead right now and she replaced me in 3 weeks, I genuinely hope someone's asking very serious questions. and we laugh, and I'm glad you laughed. I didn't intend for that, but if we can laugh at the ridiculousness of it, then why do we put this on parity with that? If more people valued home above gold, this world would be a merrier place. And I apologize, if you don't know who Thorin Oakenshield is, you need to sort your life out. So culprit number 2 on our distraction list is the news and politics. We have been slowly convinced that we should be paying attention to everything all of the time because everything is a big deal. Not only that, social media, on the other front, has convinced us that our opinions actually matter, when I contest that they don't. So should we be paying attention to these things? Well, will it miss our attention if we don't give it? Has the news ever really affected your plans on a day-to-day basis? But regardless of that, these two things together have led to outrage culture, which is a prolific issue no matter what your political standing is. The notion that you should be paying attention, not only that, but upset and outraged at everything that is happening, and that anybody who disagrees with you is your enemy. I was listening to a podcast where they were interviewing a famous comedian, and he was very invested in some shows that he had coming up, paying attention to writing new material, making sure everything was in place for these shows. Some social tragedy happened. I don't recall what. He didn't do anything because he was unaware of it. He didn't put out a tweet with a hashtag. He didn't change his profile picture. He didn't do anything. The next time he goes to his social media platforms, he said he was inundated with messages ranging from what's your opinion on this to why haven't you said anything about this to sheer hate. He said the one that stuck out to him the most was the quote, "Your silence on this issue is deafening." He said, I want to talk about that for just a second. Because I'm a comedian. I'm the guy that makes you laugh. I'm not an activist. I'm not a social commenter. I don't care about politics. I'm the guy that's supposed to make you laugh for fun. And you may say, yeah, he's famous, but we do the same thing, don't we? We exhaust ourselves trying to deal with these issues, consuming information, forming an opinion, broadcasting that opinion, and then debating it with each other, only to go through this cycle again and again and again as more information becomes available. What does 1 Thessalonians say? The outrage culture that I've been describing is very antithetical to this. So the context here is Paul's talking about sanctification and love. Starting in verse 9, he says, "Now to the love of the brethren, you have no need for anyone to write to you, for you yourselves are taught by God to love one another. For indeed you do practice it towards all the brethren who are in all Macedonia. But we urge you, brethren, to excel still more, and make it your ambition to live a quiet life, and to tend your own business, and to work with your hands, just as we commanded you, so that you will behave properly towards outsiders." This attitude here, before I go on, I just want to say this attitude here is part of what we have all accepted as morally good, and therefore we should be doing these things. But let's also consider briefly all of the letters of Paul, which are many, and we're not going to get too specific. But he had plenty of opportunities to comment on the policies of Rome, gossip, senators, Caesars, the goings-on of the Jewish nation and their leadership, and he chose to instead just encourage the church to be the church. I can think of two instances that may be corroborated with recent events in some of his writings. One, he calls out individuals for problems and attitudes. Two, he says, hey, persecution is coming, you be ready to endure it. So let's talk about an example that is both ironically in jobs and politics. This is President Theodore Roosevelt. He was known as a cowboy persona with a very eccentric attitude. He's also one of the greatest presidents we've ever had. We don't talk about Alice much. Alice is his oldest daughter. She inherited his personality, we'll say, but she also led a very controversial life. Now keep in mind, this is the 1910s, so there's very strict social standards for both men and women, but mostly women. And none of the things I'm going to say are going to really shock us today, but back then these were all controversies in their own right. Alice smoked in public. She was a known late-night party animal. She was seen wagering and gambling with bookies. She was infamous for performing practical jokes on members of the House of Representatives in the House chambers. She would eventually marry, but she had numerous documented affairs, and her only child was the result of one of them. She would barge into the Oval Office uninvited and give her unsolicited opinion on the comments of the day, of the issues of the day, and then just turn around and leave. Eventually, his presidential aides said, "Mr. President, are you going to do something about this?" His response was simple and very telling. He said, and I quote, "I can either run this country or I can attend to Alice, but I cannot possibly do both." And although he's considered to be a great president, with this attitude, I think we can clearly see he had some priorities out of order in terms of his responsibility and his attention. Lastly, this evening, I want to talk about our time. If I ask folks, how are you doing? I've noticed they say one of two things generally now. I'm either tired or I'm busy. And if they don't tell you that, you can really kind of see it. So we have to ask, do we value being productive? Do we value being tired? Or do we just glorify being busy in our lives? Because if we started accounting for our hours more, we would realize that we're not as time-strapped as we thought. Maybe we're just spending all of our moments in the wrong places. Because let's recall the parable of the wedding feast in Matthew 22. The context here is that there's a feast coming, invitations go out, those invitations are ignored, there is yet another effort to get invitations out. People continue to refuse. And we're not told any reason why they weren't there, if they were right or wrong, but they very clearly, based on the context, missed out on something important just by not being there. So this is Steve Harvey. He is the current host of Family Feud, and he caused quite an interesting conundrum several years ago when he sent an email to his production team of a show he was shooting. I'm going to paraphrase that memo for you this evening. In it, he said, Can't wait to work with you guys. We're going to make a great show. We're going to have a great season, but we're going to do things a little differently this time around. You're not going to approach me in the hallways. You're not going to approach me in makeup. You're not going to approach me in wardrobe. In fact, you are not going to approach me, period. Do not drop into my office. Do not drop in on set. I will gladly speak to you about anything and everything you want to talk about in as much as you make an appointment. And I am not advocating for this level of rigidity in our lives, but do we value our time? Do we value are we aware of what could be stealing it from us? Who or what deserves a lot out of us, but in reality gets very little? Who or what deserves little out of us, but actually gets a lot? And how do we balance our responsibilities, our attention, our time, our resources? These are not easy questions to answer because there is no magic bullet that's going to solve it for every single one of us. And my technical mentor, who is a brilliant person, has a saying that is incredibly frustrating. He says, if you want to add value, you have to add sweat. Meaning, if you want something worthwhile, it's going to be difficult to get there. But what I do know is that one of the most powerful moments of my life started with someone saying, you all, here at Jones Road, seem to genuinely care for one another. And I do believe we have to continue doing that, and that is going to take our resources. So what if we took some time away from consuming the news and used it to check in with each other? What if we turned our desires to be on social media into an opportunity to just write a note to the men we support? What if we stopped questioning all of our possible decisions or the best possible decision we could make and allowed our proximity to determine our responsibility? I'm not making the claims that I have perfected this in my life, but this is what I'm striving towards. And one thing I haven't mentioned, but is a given, is that we have a responsibility to God. Chiefly, to render obedience to live a just and a righteous life. And if you would like to put on Christ, or maybe you're struggling with your responsibilities to God, we would love to help you if you would make that known by making your way down to the front as we stand and sing.
Thank you for watching this video. We're glad that you have found our channel, and in fact, while you're here, we would encourage you to subscribe to the Jones Road Church of Christ channel. We have several videos already up, and we believe you'll find these to be true to God's Word, helpful to you in your journey toward God. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us and let us know how we can help you.